Good evening, church. This is Executive Pastor Hugh. I wanted to touch on a subject with you guys that hopefully we'll never have to face, but in the event that we do, I'd like for us to all be on the same page and be prepared. Uh, the subject that I'd like to talk to you guys about today is the reporting of child abuse or elderly abuse at our church. Um, a question you might have would be, who is responsible to report these things if it's suspected. First of all, it is the clergy's responsibility, which would be the leaders of the church. However, uh, in the state of West Virginia, if you actually witness it, or it is actually the information is divulged to you, you may be asked to testify. So therefore, you are responsible. If you are a volunteer at our church, if you are a pastor at our church in any area, or if you are on our staff. Now, the reason I say volunteers is because our children's ministries are pretty much strictly ran by volunteers. We have Pastor Cheryl and Pastor Anna who do the children. Pastor Cheryl is the children's pastor, and Pastor Anna is the teen pastor. Now, everybody else that works with our youth is volunteers. So therefore, you guys are our front line. You see more than anyone else sees. So in the event that you would witness or one of the children would come to you and tell you something about this, you would want to come to myself or your pastor, Pastor Anna or Pastor Cheryl, in which case they would come to me. Uh, the reason I say would come to me is because we want to make this again where everybody's on the same page. We don't need you to first and foremost report it on your own without consulting us, because we want to make sure that, for one, we all know, and for two, that what you witnessed or what you appear to have witnessed truly is abuse. Because, of course, you don't want to get charged with a false report because there's consequences for that as well. Now, um, according to what I've read and studied on this subject, from first, Grohl and Salmon Attorneys at Law have a page, and according to what they define under modern privilege, is every one of the 50 states in the U.S., as well as the District of Columbia, has some version of clergy penitent privilege. These statutes may vary in terms and applicability, but the premise is generally the same. Specifically, jurisdictions sometimes differ on their definition of clergy and or confidential communications, as well as who holds the privilege. However, the majority of the states have a substantially similar clergy penitent privilege statutes. Okay, in the state of West Virginia, as according to our West Virginia legislature code, chapter 49, child welfare, article 2, section 49 2 803, persons mandated to report suspected abuse and negligent requirements. Any medical, dental, or mental health professional, Christian Science practitioner, religious healer, school teacher, or other school personnel, social service worker, child care or foster care worker, emergency medical services personnel, peace officer or law enforcement official, humane officer, member of the clergy, that would be pastors or leaders, staff, circuit court judge, family court judge, employees of the Division of Juvenile Services, magistrate, youth camp administrator or counselor, employee, coach, or volunteer of any entity that provides organized activities for children or commercial film, photographic print processor who has reasonable cause to suspect that a child is neglected or abused, including sexual abuse or sexual assault, or observes the child being subjected to conditions that are likely to result in abuse or neglect, shall immediately, not more than 24 hours after suspecting this abuse or neglect, report the circumstances to the Department of Health and Human Resources. In any case where the reporter believes that the child suffered serious physical abuse or sexual assault, the reporter shall also immediately report to the state police and any law enforcement agency having jurisdiction to investigate the complaint. Any person required to report under this article who is a member of the staff or volunteer of a public, private institution, school, entity that provides organized activity for children, facility or agency or designated agent thereof, who may supplement the report or cause, that would be you, an additional report to be made, provided that notifying a person in charge, a supervisor, or superior does not exempt a person from his or her mandate to report suspected abuse or neglect. So, in layman's terms, what that is saying is, if you see it, you report it. You do need to come to your superiors, and you do need to let us know, but you are still responsible for reporting it. Further, West Virginia Code that I found on the reading material, Clergy as Mandatory Reporters of Child Abuse and Neglect, Summary of State Laws, says in West Virginia Code, Chapter 49, Section 6A-2, when any member of the clergy has reasonable cause to suspect that a child is neglected or abused, or observes the child being subjected to conditions that are likely to result in abuse or neglect, such person shall immediately, this says 48 hours, however the West Virginia Legislation Code, which has been updated, says 24 hours, after suspecting this abuse, report the circumstances or cause, a report to be made to the Department of Health and Human Resources. Now, I know sometimes these things are sticky situations and people are a little leery of getting caught in the middle of something like this. However, you do need to know you are responsible. Therefore, you would be hindering the law enforcement and Department of Human Resources, which in our state would be the Child Protective Services, from doing their job. And you would be held liable, personally liable. This could also extremely damage our church. Who would want their kid to come to a church that allows abuse to go? Any person, official, or institution required by this article to report a case involving a child known or suspected to be abused or neglected, who knowingly fails to do so or knowingly prevents another person from acting reasonably from doing so, is guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction shall be confined in jail not more than 90 days or fined not more than $5,000, or both, fined and confined. Any person, official, or institution required by this article to report a case involving a child known or suspected to be sexually assaulted or sexually abused, or a student known or suspected to have been a victim of any non-consensual sexual activity, sexual intercourse, or sexual intrusion on school premises, in our case church premises, who knowingly fails to do so or knowingly prevents another person acting reasonably from doing so, is guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof will be confined in jail not more than 6 months and fined more than $10,000, or both. Now, that is from childwelfare.gov. You can look that up, and then it's the West Virginia Code 49-2-812. So, therefore, you can be personally held liable if you don't report these things. Again, you'll want to speak with your superiors as well, just to bring us on board with the situation so that we can all look at it objectively, subjectively. But it is required that you report it. Now, in the case of elderly abuse, the same thing applies. The codes are different and I couldn't find the exact specific codes. However, elderly abuse most times in most states fall under child abuse as well. Same. So, with that being said, some of you may ask, well, what if someone who was a convicted sex offender wants to come to our church? So what do we do then? We're going to welcome them in just like we would somebody who is a convicted drug dealer or a convicted thief or a convicted murderer. We're going to bring them in our church and we're going to love them. However, just as if somebody, you know that somebody comes into our church is a convicted thief, you're not going to leave your purse sitting on the front pew, are you? So let's just be mindful and watchful, but not make them feel out of place and uncomfortable. Because just like Jesus said, the well doesn't need a hospital. The sick is who needs the hospital. Well, the church is the hospital for the spiritually sick. So when people come to us, we don't turn them away. We bring them in and we love them through whatever they're going through. If a sex offender was to come to our church, myself, along with the other pastors, would bring all of our volunteers and staff together. We would make them aware of this person. And again, we would not treat them any differently. They are to be welcomed and they are to be loved. Many people have changed. And so therefore, we're going to take that into consideration, actually to the utmost consideration. And we're going to pray for them and we're going to hope that they have changed. But at the same time, we're going to keep a mindful watch on things without making it obvious that that's what we're doing. So you guys have a blessed evening. I love you and be blessed.